Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
Welcome to the show, Brandon. This is going to be a really special show for us both because we have our dads that are actually going to be joining us, and my son will be joining us on the show tonight. And one of the reasons for you listeners, just to give you some context to this, so Brandon and I started thinking about a week or so ago. I could have probably ended the sentence right there, actually. Just Brandon and I started thinking of it a week or so ago. But we wanted to do something special for Father's Day, just to make sure we're honoring our fathers. But then at the same time, in light of what Mental Advantage Podcast is all about, and the mission of this podcast is to give people a path to a map, if you will, to a better version of themselves, is we have lots of fathers out there that would benefit from two people who we both agree are some of the greatest examples of fatherhood that there is out there. So we wanted to have them join us.
No, and I think you just kind of touched on something really important, and I know we talk about it in the podcast, is that modeling and being there, and they were truly great examples. And if you can get through this episode and not have learned something, or where you want to leave a comment or a question as a follow-up, I would be really surprised. So I'm excited for the listeners to hear our fathers and to hear Mack as well. Mack does a lot, obviously, for the show as our producer. And I think this is a really great show that pays tribute to some really good dads, and happy Father's Day to all of our listeners out there. Right. And
absolutely.
This is a good one.
Yeah, I think you're going to definitely need the pencil and paper for this one. And if you're, not a father, or not going to be a father anytime soon, or you just know somebody who's going to be, definitely take some notes for them, because there's two good ones here that talk a lot about some of the challenges they faced in fatherhood, some of the things they learned from their own dads, and then some of the things that they tried to impart to us. And then hopefully we are doing a good enough job imparting it to our children. So definitely anxious to hear from Steve Cullen, Mike Allen, and Mack Cullen on this week's show. So enjoy it. So Brandon, we've got a great, a really interesting show this evening. We decided,
let's use interesting, not great. Let's see how this goes.
We'll reserve great
judgment. Yeah.
So we have on the show, and I don't know if the listeners will be happy to hear from these two, or maybe a little bit perplexed or what, but it's the people, the two men that were partly responsible for both of you and I being here, which is your dad, Mike Allen, and my dad, Steve Cullen, who've joined us tonight. And we also have my son, Mack Cullen, who most of the listeners will know from the fact that he's our kind of, producer, maybe, just does a little bit of everything behind the scenes. Yeah. I don't know if any of it was by design, if he agreed to any of it, but we've used his services from the get-go, mainly because that was the apartment that we had all of the setup in. So he had a better setup than I did. But no, we did, in honor of Father's Day, we decided that we would have our dads come on, because selfishly, maybe with a little bias, both would agree that we've had two really great examples of fatherhood. And it's helped us kind of, as we've started our, journeys into being fathers, although it's been a longer journey now, as most of our children are getting up there a little bit more in age than they were before. But definitely wanted to have these two on and just kind of get their opinion, change the pace a little bit as far as our show. Going to be a little bit less about mental performance tonight, although who knows? I mean, there's probably part of the, being a dad that you definitely have mental performance in there.
For sure. And I think, it's one of those things, John, where at some point you go from playing checkers to chess, and these two were kind of the chess masters for you and I, right? And definitely instilled stuff that even on the mental side, from whether it's faith and or it's just how to prepare and how to be ready for what life throws at you. I think that both of them helped us out tremendously. And so I'm interested and excited to see how this thing goes tonight.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, welcome to you both. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, and especially when you normally talk about mental performance, I probably fit on the other end of that spectrum. So thank you. But yeah,
you're the expert in this regard, right? So it's nice to have you both in here. I do have why don't we just kind of start out with a question about, as Brandon just said, I mean, you guys have really been the two that have been so instrumental, of course, in being our examples of what it was like to be dads and to kind of help your children navigate that path, whatever path they take. What was it like? What do you feel as you kind of look back on things from your own fathers? What were some of the lessons that you took that you felt like helped you become the fathers that you all were? And Mr. Allen, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
That's a great question, John. I think the fact that, growing up, there were 6 siblings, and so there was a total of 8 people in the house. So it was one of the main things that stuck with me through all of the turmoil, if you want to call it that, because it was tumultuous during different points of time. But the thing that Dad used to tell me, said, look, I'm doing the best that I can. There's not a playbook for this stuff. There's not anything that tells you how to corral 8 people in a house and try to keep some sense of order in the house. And as I got older, since I was the oldest of the 6 siblings, the fact that he said, don't try to be perfect with any of this, just be reasonable and kind of take a reasonable man approach to the things that you're going to be confronted with. Now, that was probably the last thing he said as the U-Haul door slammed on the truck when I was sitting off in college. But I think the piece that and Brandon can attest to this is that with all the things that took place in his life, the one thing that he always had, and what it always reminded me of, is you have to keep your sense of humor about things. He said, you can't take life so seriously that it drags you down. He said, there are times to be serious, but don't take yourself so serious that you can't laugh at yourself when you need to. And I think we all need to do that a lot, especially in today's environment as well. So from an initial concept that kind of stuck in my head, having gone through that 8 people in the house routine, that was the thing those were the things that really stood out, for me. So.
No, that's really good. And, it's interesting. Dad had a similar childhood in the sense that there was, Dad, 9 of you all, right? That
right.
were in your house. So you weren't the top of the ladder there, but pretty close to the top. What was it that Grandpa shared with you that you felt were some of the key things that you took with you as you moved into that next stage in life?
I think respect is one, especially for the older generation. And just as Mike said, you don't take everything so seriously that just gets in your way, which it can do. And the whole idea of, we had actually 9 kids and the 2 parents, which was 11. So that that was kind of an entirely different setup than what we had even at home with our 7 children. I think that we really need to just show that respect for others and to love one another. Try, that's the whole story, the whole way we should go with life in general. Just not the people in the family or anything like that, but we should extend that family to others and show that same kind of love for them as well. But growing up I'm sure wasn't easy under me. If it wasn't for your mother as a buffer, it might have been a lot different. There is life after childhood, so yeah, that's just about the way you can look at it.
Yeah, well, look, I think you've done pretty well for yourself in that parent category. I think the proof's in the pudding, maybe with the exception of myself. But other than that, there was a pretty good run you had with the other 6. So,
well, listen, they can't. Hey, listen, you can't bat 1,000, right?
That's right.
I was the only one, and Big Mike still kind of came up short. So it is what it is. You get what you get.
I think that's where the sense of humor came into play.
That's right.
I'm still trying to figure that out. Yeah,
that's right.
That's right. No, but I tell you, I think the thing that's I've always appreciated about both of you is the fact that the boundaries of your fatherhood didn't stop just at your own children. Both of you, I know I can honestly say that having gone through college and being Brandon's roommate and stuff like that, I would feel just as comfortable calling Mr. Allen up for anything in my life as I do my own dad. So, I mean, I think, and I know is not just with me, that's with all of Brandon's friends felt that way about you and Mrs. Allen. And I think that's one of the things that you guys both share in common is this idea that, hey, we all have a role to play. It's that whole mindset of it takes a village or whatever, but it really does is that you guys, that demonstrating that level of caring for not just your own, but for their friends or, is I think something that's to be commended.
I was just going to say along those lines, John, I think one of the things that my dad had mentioned, and a lot of this was right up at the point when I was getting ready to leave to go off to college. And I think one of the things that he told me one time is he said, look, you've got to be able to talk to executives or important people at the same and talk to the cleaning crew in a building with the same passion, with the same interest, because you never know what impact your words are going to have on somebody that may be having a really crappy day. And, he said, just don't look down on the cleaning crew, and you don't have to look intimidated at the executives either. So, just keep an even keel, like I said, because you just don't know what you're going to talk to them about or say to them that could have a, pretty dramatic impact on that day and beyond. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Dad, you were nodding about that. I know that's something you do a lot of as well is always talking to everybody. And my kids even make fun of me for doing this because I'm always, the person who's been standing outside the building talking to the person who was opening the door for about 15, 20 minutes. And they're like, what are you doing here?
Oh, I can't even tell you how many times. How many times have they said, oh my God, he's talking again? Like, why is he even talking to these people? And you walk out to the car and they go, did you know that person? It's like, well, not before now, but so yeah, that's funny.
You can't make new friends if you don't talk to them,
There you go. That's right.
Well, and I think what Mr. Allen said is so true is that you just don't know who's going to need you and where you're being called to start that conversation either. I mean, that's one of those things that I'm a big believer in that same mindset of you just by initiating the conversation, that might be that person that you're being called to talk to, and like you say, be in their life in the right time, and you would never know it if you didn't start the conversation up.
Well, I am a firm believer that God puts people in your life for whatever reason, and you never know who those people are, and you never know how, like you said, John, how that conversation may be interpreted. That may be for them a compassionate, empathetic conversation that they really needed at that time for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
And you and I and your dad and my dad, no, we don't necessarily go into a conversation with the thought of that, but it's just something that I think is there. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mack, what are you taking from all of this? You haven't had a chance to speak up yet. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on with this very prestigious group of men.
as if we had a choice. You're the producer. I mean, you kind of said, "Hey, if you want it done, you got to have me on."
Yeah. I was gonna chime in one way or the other if I was gonna have you guys record this and then record my own parts in between. It was gonna get in there somehow. So. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of valuable lessons that the listeners can take in. I'm definitely gonna take some in. I've definitely learned a lot of life lessons from pretty much everybody in this call. So it's just a good time.
Absolutely. So what do you think, guys, speaking to our dads for a second, what do you think as far as the important things as you all moved forward with your own, children that you wanted to try to impart to them? What did you feel like were the most important things? And I know that's a loaded question because there's so many things and you're never done, I don't think, teaching these things. But what were some of the things that you really felt like, hey, if I can leave these 2 or 3, seeds with them, it's going to be really successful, sending them out there?
Yeah. So I think, for me, there are about 3 of them, and Brandon would probably say, "Oh boy, here he goes again." But, I think the first thing was, I don't believe we ever told him what to think. I think we told him how to think, and that how you think and the decisions and the actions that are a result of how you think either have rewards or consequences attached to them. And it was a matter of giving him enough rope that would allow him to go do that and learn by it and stumble and fall and make bad choices. But at the end of the day, knew what the rewards or the consequences, could be for that. And I think the fact that he, for the most part, made good choices along the way, to the point that, it was not really that much of an upbringing in crisis as it, can be for some parents. And, but I also think that you've got to give the kids the ability to have enough rope to get out there, to stumble, to fall, to bruise, to cut, to bleed, and all that. And that's the learning part of all that. And I think that's one of the main things that we provided. And I think the other piece is trust. I will trust you as long as, up until the point where you give me a reason not to trust you.
Yep.
He had a very Dalton from Roadhouse approach, right? Be nice until it's time not to be nice, or trust until it's time not to trust.
Yeah, and I think that was from, if you had to encapsulate that along with the piece that's I think a derivative of that, and that's the attitude portion. And you guys talk about this on your normal podcast, that it's not necessarily what happens, but how you respond to what happens and the attitude that you take and make with that is a key as well. So, some of the things that you guys cover in your podcast, quite honestly, and y'all talked about this before, this has been going on for a long time. There just really wasn't a name for it.
Right,
there wasn't a technique. There wasn't a focus on it. It was just, this is, like I said earlier, not having a playbook. These are the things that you did the best that you could, I guess, with what you were handed to us. So, you just have to go with that part of it. So, yeah.
So for sure, one of the things, to tie it back to the mental performance thing that I appreciate maybe more than anything, because the rope analogy that Dad used is 100% true. It was definitely, they let me test my boundaries. But they never gave me so much. What I always say is they never gave me so much rope to hang myself. It was always very controlled, from the standpoint of, I was never, ever, ever, ever scared to fail. Like, there was never a time that they wouldn't allow me to go out and fall and pick myself up. And as an adult now, or, well, I don't know that I call myself an adult. We'll just say as an older person.
We were going to edit it out.
Yeah. Mack was going to do his magic, but it's the one thing that I look back on, and it's the thing that I think the responsibility equals freedom, and the consequence, you'll get whatever you kind of reap what you sow. But I think one of the biggest things that I try to allow my kids to do is fail. Man, go out there and learn life's lessons. And you can't do it if your parents are constantly hovering over you, and you can't do it if they don't trust you enough to make mistakes. And it's the one thing that I love Mom and Dad for more than almost anything, was they allowed me to screw up, and I screwed up a lot, but they were always there supporting and kind of, they weren't always saying, hey, that's okay. You did great. That's not real. Like it was real love that was like, hey, okay, we messed up. So how do we figure this out? Right.
Yeah. And I think it's to what your dad was saying is, it's the old adage about, you don't prepare the path. You don't prepare the path for your child. You prepare your child for the path.
Absolutely.
Because you have to be the one who's doing that. Dad, what were some of the things that you tried to get across?
Well, I completely agree with the both of Mike and Brandon there, but you also have to remember that when you guys would stumble, that pained the parents as well. I think probably when I was growing up, one of the most important things that I felt was, I loved my parents so much that when I did something that was something they wouldn't have agreed with, I had this self-inflicted punishment, that you have to do on yourself. And it really hurts when you start talking about what you've really done to them, and knowing that they're as good as gold. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, it's just, and like, I don't know, most all these things are a little bit different too. The growing up in the country is a little bit different than the town grow-ups and things like that. There's probably a lot more than a child could get into trouble-wise in town than as opposed to the country. And so, I mean, the parents are there all the time. But I had a terrific childhood, so, and I hope my kids had somewhat similar, that were completely satisfied with that. So
John, there was never worse, right, to what your dad just said, than when you knew you disappointed your parents.
Oh, there's no question about it.
It was so much worse than ever getting a spanking, or the threat of being grounded or whatever was, oh boy, I've disappointed them.
Right. I think it's the great motivator is that but I think that's earned too. I think it's one of those things that you both and you know, both our moms as well earned that respect that you get. You know, I don't think that's a given for most people, but I do think it's one of those things that when you have two good ones that are raising you,
Right.
and you know that I mean, that was the one thing I appreciate. You know, if I had to go back to question one, for example, about what do you feel were most important lessons you learned from your dad and parents in general, was just unconditional love.
Right.
I mean, it's really just that ability to parent through and really conveying to your kids that, look, you're going to screw up, to your point, Brandon, but no matter what you do, there is literally nothing you can do that will ever cause us not to love you. Like that,
Absolutely.
I think that's a really, really big message for parents to convey to their kids. And that helps develop the trust and everything else. But I mean, when they know that there's nothing that they can do that are going to cause you to, I can be upset with the performance, but I will always love the performer.
Right. So I've got a question. So as it pertains to John and I, and this may be a little off script, but we talked on the podcast before about how a parent is really your first mental coach, right? Looking back on it, and was there ever anything from an athletic perspective that you tried to make sure, because sports kind of mimics life, but was there ever anything that you really wanted to make sure, whether it's, you know, be aggressive or just whatever that was there anything on the sports arena that you felt like you wanted to instill as well?
I think you should go along with the child, you know, not be pushy or anything like that, and almost force him or lead him a little stronger than perhaps he wants to be led into a certain sport or anything like, or anything, as a matter of fact, just not sports. But no, I think you can probably get a more rounded child, you know, letting them make decisions and things like that, and just be there for them, back them up, and support them as best you can.
Yeah, I think that's Steve's spot on that. I think the piece that you're trying to avoid the potholes as much as you can in the guidance part, without being kind of a helicopter dad type of a thing. But I think that to Steve's point, to some extent, you're, at least what I found myself doing, and you probably attest to that, Brandon, is, and you guys probably have done the same thing as you coached, you know, your kids as well.
What, getting liquored up before games?
Yeah.
I took care of that serious moment.
It only happened just a handful of times, so it's not that big of a deal.
Hey, he's not too old to take care of right now.
That's right.
But, you know, I think that the piece that I always had to kind of back off a little bit is, I think, because in being involved in coaching and all that, and being directly on the field, you know, growing up as a coach, you know, is one of the things that you push your kids even harder than you probably do others. And I think it's that, you know, catching yourself and making sure that you're not doing that, so that if your intent, and I used to tell the kids this all the time, I want you to go out and play and have fun enough and learn enough that you want to come back next year. And, you know, just to keep that theme going for as long as they felt like they were having fun. And so I think that's the thing that I had to try to back off, to make sure that Brandon and others, you know, did not get burned out on, you know, being too coachy, too aggressive, you know, and things like that. So it's kind of but at 7, 8, 9, 14, you know, whatever, there's still guidance that's needed, but it's a throttle, you know, that you have to use, and you know when you have to put on the gas and when you got to step on the brake.
Right.
So that was the thing that was always a challenge for me.
Yeah. And Mack, what are your thoughts on all of this? Because you've seen, both sides of this. I mean, you know, not the dad part, but you've seen the fact of kind of what lessons were passed on to me and then what was tried to be passed on to you.
Well, I think the biggest thing, and I've heard it a million times from you, and I'm sure Bailey has heard it as well, is just control what you can control. I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned. And like Brandon said, sports mimics life a lot. And this is a lesson that you can use in life, your everyday life. But controlling what you can control, there's a lot of uncontrollables out there. But there's also a lot of things that are in your hands that you want to focus more on what you can control and how you can adjust from that. And I mean, a good example of this is I was in school and things. We got a new coach and I actually ended up losing my scholarship that I was on with the new coaching staff after the first spring. And there was definitely doubts in my mind about, is this right for me? Can I move on with this? And then you just kind of look back on that lesson and just kind of analyze, kind of step out of the situation and analyze what's going on, and just kind of find the controllables. Don't worry about the uncontrollables. Oh, my scholarship's taken away. You want to focus on, there's a reason why it's taken away. Why is this happening? And what can I do about it? So focusing on your work ethic and the time management that you're putting into your craft. And once you can work on the controllables, the result it changes for the better. Got the scholarship back and went on to finish my career. But that's a lesson that you can use in sports and in life as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome.
No, I mean, look, it's definitely one of those things. And I think that everybody on here is said it in one way or another, but it's just really making sure that you're kind of dialed into that piece of response that we talked about earlier, choosing the right response. And then, like you said, Mac, perfectly right there was controlling what you can control and not getting caught up in the other part of it. So Brandon, let me ask you this, because I went back to lesson number 1. What do you feel were a couple of the most important lessons you picked up from your dad growing up?
Oh boy. I mean, I think one of the biggest things was, just find a way, just, kind of grind, and find a way to make things happen, because, looking back on it, and I give them a hard time, as I think the listeners have figured out. I definitely jab at the people I love, for sure. So I used to kid them a lot that, and to hear Dad talk about, my grandfather, instilling some wisdom on him as he was driving away from college, and I'm thinking, well, that's good because I was born a year later. Right. So,
well, clearly, timing's everything.
Yeah, clearly, like, hey, let's see how this works out. But I think the grind was always a thing, because the one thing that I think most people, if you ask them about Dad, they would tell you, he has and had always had a tremendous work ethic. He was always generous with his time, and his resources, whatever those look like. It's kind of an ongoing joke. If I need something up here at the house, he always tells me, I've got another one of those in his garage, and he's full of crap. Like, he shows up with it's brand new in the box, and it's oh, you just happen to have the brand new, 2021 model, multiple, but it was the stuff that he and Mom both did, where it was because they were young parents, and there were times that we as a family definitely grinded together. And that was one of the things that I think I love most about my childhood was It wasn't always perfect, but it was always perfect for us, right? Because there was a tremendous amount of faith in the house. There was a tremendous amount of love and just saying, hey, whatever life throws at us, we'll figure it out. Like it is what it is. It's the thing that's just in front of us now. That and never let temporary problems, a lot like what Mack is saying about, control the controllable, but never let a temporary problem lead to a permanent decision, right? Like whatever you're going through now, you will not be going through forever. Be mentally strong, and get through it and find a way. And it's funny when difficult times come up, I kind of tell myself all the time, like, this won't last. And there's no reason that you kind of can't poke fun at it or have fun or whatever. So it's interesting because I wouldn't have ever really said it the way Dad said it there at the beginning, in the way that my grandfather said, don't ever take yourself too seriously. But for sure, it's the one thing that I look back on and go, okay, we can, none of this is life or death, and let's just figure it out and grind.
Yeah, I want Mr. Allen, I want you and Dad to both speak to this, because I know that, Mr. Allen, you and Mrs. Allen had, young couple with a child and some of the challenges that presents. And Dad, I mean, you've had 7 kids, that a lot of mouths to feed. I mean, just speak to, if you would, this is a little bit off script as well, but just speak to, if you would, what was the mindset dealing with some of those challenges? I mean, I know, to Brandon's point, it kind of takes what it takes, but Dad, maybe talk a little bit about what it was like, knowing that, I mean, you got to do a lot of stuff to feed seven children.
Yeah, well, that's for sure, John. And it certainly wasn't easy. There just so many things that enter into a picture. I look back at my dad, and I mean, with his 9 children, and he had to sometimes be working 3 jobs just to put food on the table. And we grew a lot of things, but there was never a time that I can think of that I ever needed something that he didn't make an effort to, at least to be able to get it to me. I remember explicitly when I graduated from high school at that time, big top coats were the thing, and I thought that would be a great thing to have. But, you don't think about the extra expense that you are or you create in addition to the family needs and things like that when you're a kid. You just don't think about that. But those are some of the things that pop in your mind, as you get older and you see it. I really don't know how they did it. You just work through it. That's the only thing you can do. And with the help of your mom and all that, we were able to get through well. And I don't think anybody actually suffered mentally from it, certainly. But no, I'm pleased with everyone. Every one of you have great talents and good work ethics. And I'm very pleased with you.
Well, I know, Dad, that one thing, and we'll get to Mr. Allen about this because I definitely want to hear what he has to say about this, but something you just reminded me of that was a lesson that I learned all throughout life was you're never so in such a bad way that you can't help somebody else who's in a worse way.
Right.
Because I can tell you, I can't count how many times that being younger, knowing that, we weren't necessarily, probably, I mean, you all were living in a way that you were just trying to find a way. But I can tell you every single Christmas, we were always finding another family that was in more need and taking, stuff to them, food or gifts or whatever the case may be. And you've told stories plenty of times where you just didn't know when the next check was going to come in or when something was going to come in, but it was that giving that you would receive. All of a sudden a check would show up that you didn't even expect. Mr. Allen, talk to me about those challenges you all were facing and managing through that.
Oh boy, that was glorious. Having Brandon at a young age while I was still in college, one of the things and Steve pointed out that you just work at it. I mean, you just absolutely work at it. So, part of the challenge of being, in college with a son and playing baseball and not having a lot of time for extra income, you get creative. I mean, those Absolutely. Are the things that drives you to do what you need to do. Maybe not by your choice, and you just have to make it work. So, for me, it was, trying to manage going from a business class in college to baseball field afterwards to working in a hospital at night and then getting home. And then it's that rinse and repeat, stuff over and over again. And, or trying to find, when the hospital job went away, my choice, by the way, got tired of carrying dead people. But
I was just getting ready to say, let's not act like it was all
literally
your choice
burying
when you
the
freaked out by deciding to work in the morgue. So you ghoul.
No, this was not a pre-med major that I had. This was this was money at the time. But I think the thing that we ended up doing is, okay, I've got limited income, I've got school, I've got baseball. Oh, by the way, there's this program called food stamps. So we would go down the first of the month. I'd give them $12, and we got $148 worth of food stamps, and we ate like land barons for the first 2 weeks of every month.
Yeah.
And then the baseball team would come over, and we had all kinds of good stuff. And then the last 2 weeks, it was peanut butter and crackers and all that. But the point being, I think, Brandon, thank goodness he was young enough where hopefully he didn't remember all that. But the pieces that you do work on, you work through that. And it is not that it's automatic, but it's also one of those things that for some reason, and maybe because there were 8 people in the house, you just found a way to do stuff. You found a way to make things work and happen. And looking back on it, it was an absolutely great learning experience. Yeah. Now, would I recommend that to kids today? Probably not. But it still gives us enough opportunity to look back and say, okay, yeah, we did make it through that period of time, and we did make it. And Brandon, for the most part, turned out to be a pretty decent guy. So, I can't complain about all of it that we ended up going through. So, yeah.
I was just thinking when you were saying that I think the fact that there wasn't the resources to just, have everything and be able to push everything on to your kids at a young age or whatever probably ended up being beneficial. It's almost like it prevented that participation trophy mindset of like, oh, you're going to get rewarded for everything. Sure. Because I can remember, right. You had to really, like straight A's, I don't even think was enough, right? You had to have straight A's and then maybe have done something else on top of that to get like a trip to the restaurant or something like that. And it was a special deal, and you felt like you really, really earned that. And so I think that's one of those things that looking back, probably in some, ironic twist to the whole thing, it probably worked out really well that we weren't rewarded so much with just some of the things you see today. Heck, kid gets a base hit in a game and they're going to, Top Golf or something for him and all of his friends or whatever. Yeah. It's crazy to see that. But no, I think it's definitely one of those things that work ethic 100% goes forward to the next, and you just find a way. And it goes like, Brandon was saying earlier, it transfers to other things in life. Is you just got to keep on grinding until you work it out. So what did Brandon, what are some of the things that you've kind of looked at as a dad now and trying to impress upon your children?
I mean, I think, John, that it's very much cyclical, and you can understand how things kind of follow a pattern, because if you had a childhood that you can look back on fondly, you think, well, it was good for me. This is something that I should try to pass on to my kids. And I think, the one of the biggest things for me is to focus on what you need to focus on at that time. And the other thing is work ethic. I think that, not to sound like the old guy on the porch that says, it was so much better back in my day. But the one thing that I know that I grew up with was, hey, you if you want that, and I think you just kind of touched on it, if you want this, you have to work at it. And it's the one thing that I think gets lost a lot of times, is that kids and people in general, not just kids, but, there's not necessarily an opportunity around every corner. Take the opportunity that the good Lord has put in front of you today, and let's see what happens. And you know what? Maybe it sucks. Maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe whatever. But let's at least see, because if you think you're going to turn around and have another opportunity like the one that you have, it's not. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. So it is the stuff where, hey, responsibility equals freedom. My kids would probably tell you they've heard that about 18,000 times. For sure, go out there and fail fast, learn as much as you can. Work. Don't think that we're just going to, be responsible and work for things. And so it's that type of parenting that I try to focus on. And, the interesting part is, maybe we'll have this same conversation in 20 years and see what they have to say about it. But, right. That's the thing about parenting. You never know if you're really doing it right until, on down the road.
It's like coaching. Yeah,
sure.
I mean, it's the same thing. Come back and, Lonzo Stagg, come back in 20 years. I'll tell you how this team is.
I'll tell you how you did. But see, you're at a point where you've got Mack, and you can kind of see, okay, I did the right thing. I did good things, because this is the young man that he's turning into. Right. Now, you may not really say that because it's Mack, but I mean, it's no, but it's that type of thing, though, right? Like you're starting to see the fruit of your hard work and your parenting style, which, absolutely came down from your dad. And a tip of the cap to you, Mr. Cullen, because, you have an amazing son and an amazing family, but, I know John, obviously the most, but you did it right. And the love that you provided is generationally being pushed down, and it's a great thing to see.
Well, I will say this one thing, Brandon, that you just made me think of, and I'm surprised we haven't unpacked this yet, was you said about, the opportunities the good Lord has given us. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is this is number one on my list, and everything else is a distant second. But the number one thing that I am so thankful to my parents for is giving me the gift of faith. That was the thing that they really instilled. And I know your parents, the same thing, because you have the same spirituality and is important to you, and your faith is important to you. And it's one of those things that I think I tell people all the time, if it wasn't for that gift, I can't even imagine going through some of the, I mean, we can have all the systems and strategies we want from a mental performance standpoint, but if you don't have that hope to hold on to, you don't have that trust to hold on to. Talk to us, Dad, Mr. Allen, about just the importance of how that played a role in raising children as well.
Well, it's a very important part. I mean, we can't always do things just on our own. I think if things didn't work out, we'd go bananas. So we've got to have that faith and trust in God that things will work out. So we want to be able to use Him and His kindness and mercy on us at all times. I know that my family, my dad and mom were not very religious, but to the point that, it was instilled in us just about every day, prayers at mealtime, prayers at the evening and things like that, but not with an overwhelming amount of time. You have to say your prayers and all that stuff, gentle reminders, and you see them by example. They get down on their knees and they'll be praying and things like that. So a lot of things are just instilled to us through example, and probably the best teacher in the world. But no, I was I hope that I would be, were they alive today, I would hope that I would be pleasing to them, for having carried through the Christianity and the prayerfulness, the prayer life that I have and instilled in you all and the kids. Matter of fact, and
Yep.
it's important that we talk to our Lord every day, irrespective of how long, but it's imperative that we do that.
Yep. I totally agree. Mr. Allen?
Yeah, so it's interesting, John, you asked the question because Cindy, my wife, and Brandon's mother, we were talking about this the other day, and it's like, well, all the turmoil, all the things that are on TV that you see, that you hear, and all the things that are going to happen away from you and to you, we don't know how people can make it without having faith in the man upstairs, because trying to get through this alone without that is mind-boggling to me. I don't know how people can truly do that, and quite honestly, some people don't, and that's I think part of where pieces of the society are crumbling, is that they're losing that capability to have that meaningful relationship that God provides, and the ability to provide peace and calm the waters during the storms that we all go through. And I think it for nothing else, if the only thing that faith provided was calm and a peace that passes all understanding, that would be enough for certainly for me. And I think that's the component that I try to instill, because I'm involved at the church, and I watch and have a 4-year-old class, and so they're unfiltered, but they are truly at a point to where they're at an age where you can influence them, and because they're still forming opinions and things like that. Now, will they remember what happened in their class? Maybe not. But the point is, you're still trying to establish the roots and that foundation. So, you just pray that most of these kids will pop out on the other side in good shape, and hope that the faith and the message that you try to get to them will stick. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Mack, I know you've kind of seen this from afar, both through myself and then through Grandpa. What are your thoughts on just some of the things that you feel like from a lesson standpoint? We've been talking about faith there, but I mean, what are some things that you've learned from either myself or from Dad? I mean, that's the good thing about having, Grandpa still in your life, is what are some of the things that you've picked up from us along the way?
Well, one of the main lessons that I've just seen from you, from a example standpoint that you've set for us, is just you strive for greatness. Anybody who knows my dad knows that whenever he sets out to do something, he's not setting out to be mediocre. He sets out to be the best at it. And that's kind of where I consider myself a perfectionist. I know he considers himself one as well. And just with anything that he does, he's going to set out to be number one in the charts. Even with this podcast, he wants to make it the top of the line for the listeners. Best quality with his work. He wants to have the best region that he has when he's leading his team in sports and literally anything that he does. So that's a good lesson that he's passed down to me. With my grandpa, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is the lesson of unconditional love. He's the person who is going to go out of his way for everybody that knows. Even if he doesn't know you, he's going to do what he can to help you out if you're in need. And you can see it. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. You can see it with the family and just how he's passed down that love to everybody else. You can see it with his relationship that he had with my grandmother, and that's been passed down through generations, I assume. And he's hit on it a little bit in the show, but just unconditional love and just looking at the good in things, the good in people, and just taking all the positives that you can, because that kind of energy can be passed on to others, and you never know what kind of difference that can make in somebody's day.
Absolutely. Mack, we're going to have you on every show, by the way, now that you
a paying job, Mack.
Those are the kind of answers that dads like to hear, and I know grandpas like to hear. And so, yeah, you're going to have more than just one guest appearance from now on. So we might open with that. Brandon, what are your thoughts as you're hearing some of these things?
In terms of just faith in general?
Yeah.
There's a difference. I think everybody needs faith, right? And regardless of religion, having that faithfulness in being able to believe in something greater than yourself, right?
Yep.
And again, it's that even that team mentality that we've talked about, that I think sports does such a tremendous job is putting yourself out there for other people, right? Putting yourself out there, hoping that you can make a difference for the better in people's lives. And I think that, again, that was something that I always saw demonstrated and playing out around me, not just with my parents, but it's funny because you are the people that you hang out with and associate with. And so many of my friends and share some common beliefs and not just religious beliefs, but I mean, just like how they live their lives. I look around and so many of them share common traits, and one of them is the selfish or the unselfishness in pouring into people. And I can't even, just so you know, Mr. Cullen, there were times that I've been on the phone with John and he's like, "Hey, I need to call Dad. I think he just picked someone up from the side of the road, and I need to I need to call him real quick. I'll call you back." So. It's just stuff like that, modeling where you go, okay, call me back, but it's impactful. And then you go, "John, is everybody okay?" And he's like, yeah. Well, yeah.
We may or may not have a family from the Kmart parking lot that's now living with us.
He's fine, but there may be, a family that's moving in. But I think Dad just shared my room with somebody that I don't know. But it's those types of things, John, that from a faithfulness and from a the one thing that I would say is that I always saw faith and kindness and love exercised around me from various people, and I'm extremely blessed to have seen that.
Well, you're a great example of that too. I can tell you, having known you for almost 30 years now, maybe more,
Way too
but
long.
it's a, you talked earlier about those examples. And I mean, heck, your parents have done an amazing job, because you definitely are one of those people who, in my darkest times, in the times where I've needed someone the most, you're always the person I turn to, because of the fact that you have picked up, and they've done such a good job with you. So it's a good thing that you guys are joining us, because Brandon and I say all the time, I mean, we really have been so tremendously blessed with such great examples. So because of that, I wanted to end with this question. What advice would you all give to younger fathers, young men who are just becoming fathers for the first time, as they kind of embark on this? What tips would you give them? A couple of things. It doesn't have to be a whole list, because we know there's no handbook, as you said, Mr. Allen. There is no manual. You have to figure some of this stuff out on your own. But what do you think are some of the most important things for them?
You kind of teach them, I guess, tell them the things that you have done in your life with your children, and not to go berserk if they dirty their diapers at 2:00 in the morning or anything like that, or happen to need the bottle. But it's like I said in the beginning, it's there is life after childhood. So if you don't take the kid in when he 2:00 in the morning, you don't know what he's doing and things like that. But you just live your life as though the way you were brought up, and he can learn. I don't know. It's one of those example things, question him about how he was brought up, and does he have, the kind of faith in his family that is needed. Because as Mike and you all said a little while ago, it's imperative that you have the faith, and you have trust in our Lord and things like that, and to be in constant contact with him.
Yep.
So I think these are some of the things, and it's just got to be like we had to live, by thinking
examples. Yeah.
By example and so forth. So we all had to go through it. It's like going through a school. So like Mike said, there are no books on how to do it. So
yep.
Every situation may be different, So just bite the bullet. That's
yep.
what you do.
Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate what I truly believe is, we talked about there's no playbook, but you just don't need to be perfect, and don't try to be perfect in everything that you try to do with your kids. I mean, we've talked about just let them have enough rope so that they can learn stuff and fail. But not only don't worry about being perfect, but be consistent. That's the other thing I think that kids want. They want that degree of consistency, familiarity, and repeatability in terms of what you're trying to get them to do. And I think the rest of it, quite honestly, will absolutely work out. I mean, it is, you at some point you can't go back and try to do it all over again. You're going to have basically, one shot with your kids, and for the most part, it's about an 18-year window. So take advantage of that. Don't forget that you have kids as you start, out in your career. Make sure that you're making time every single day for the kids and the family, because the rest of the stuff, at the end of the day, it's important, but it's not that important. I mean, if you're not having the family and faith first, then the rest of it doesn't really matter. So
to use a Mike Allen phrase, it's mice nuts.
Mice nuts.
Yeah.
I think probably too, for him not to be a harsh parent, be a loving parent.
No, it's true. I mean, I think both of you have hit it right on the head. Is keep showing up and really just being there. Your presence is so important. And it's funny. I say younger parents. I mean, I'm not 50 yet, but I tell people who are younger than I am or have kids, I should say younger than I am, is that, there's no substitute for that, just being present. And that it really is true what they say, don't blink, because it is literally in a second. It seems like that They're grown and they're out of the house. And you look back and you think, to your point, Mr. Allen, you know what, that business meeting or that quest to become promoted, it's work and all of the different things I was throwing myself into or whatever, you're not going to get it back. You're not going to get those times back that you could have spent with your kids. And it really is one of those things that, as I always say, the only thing that you are thinking about if they're playing sports, for example, because I see this with young sports dads all the time, is this quest to make them so perfect that the only thing you think about when you're watching senior night or you're watching them play their last ball game, or whether that's in high school or college, is how much you just wish you could go back and see it one more time and watch them play one more time or whatever. You're not thinking about, did they ever develop the perfect swing or the perfect shot or any of that stuff. All the things you stressed about as a parent, none of it's important. It's just a matter of you just being able to go back and watch them have fun and compete one more time. So, Brandon, any final comments before we wrap things up?
Hey, listen. So, not really. I appreciate both of you guys. Both of y'all have had an impact on my life. Everybody on this call has. And so it was a tremendous opportunity to have y'all on for the Father's Day edition. I will say this, because Mr. Cullen, you had one of the best one-liners ever. And John will remember when we were playing golf in Charleston and you were with us. I was playing awful. And I think it was about the 14th or 15th hole, wasn't it, John? And I literally ran out of golf balls. I mean, it was a bad day out on the course, and I've had bad days. And so I'm driving away, and I think he turned to John and said, I wonder what took him so long.
Some of Dad's best one-liners were on the golf course. The one I share all the time is we were playing golf one time, and I was just getting so frustrated. And I was like, every time I'd come back from a hole, I'd just slam the clubs in the bag. And Dad's notoriously a man of few words, in the sense that he just isn't one of those people who's going to, constantly be telling you what to do on the golf course or anything like that. And he just is out there really just trying to enjoy the day. And it probably doesn't help where his son's just slamming clubs into the bag or whatever. So finally, about the 7th hole, we get in the cart, and he just turns and looks at me and he said, "John, you're not good enough to get mad." And I thought it was like, to this day, it's one of the best lines. And I share it with everybody. And they're always like, and his point was, look, if you went out and hit the range every single day and you were playing rounds of golf every single day or whatever, I can understand why you're getting pissed off about not hitting the shots you want to hit. But you play once every month, maybe once every month and a half or whatever. And so it was a very simple message: is you're just not good enough to get mad. So, I don't know if Dr. Mo is going to be using that line anytime soon. But,
he may or he may not. But I in all seriousness, I appreciate everybody that's on this call, and this was a great way to kind of celebrate Father's Day here on the Mental Advantage.
Absolutely. It was my favorite show we've done. No offense to any of the other guests, but let's face it, we've got two of the greatest dads that there has been, and one of the greatest sons, I will say, and one of the greatest friends. So for me, it was selfishly my favorite show. So
absolutely.
It's a great combo. Guys. Yep. Thanks for joining us. Dad, you want to say something?
Yeah, and I appreciate you having it on the podcast, and I listened to you guys, and I said I would call you Siamese twins, but I don't know whether I can say that anymore. The way the word is going.
You never know. You might have just ruined our show. We might be canceled next week.
Yeah, that's okay. Ireland will get over it.
That's right. No, it has been an honor, and we know that if people, we always say to people in the introduction to these shows is make sure you have your pen and paper ready. You're going to be learning a lot of good stuff, and I just don't think there's a better gift you can give to anyone than to show them the way, model for them, give them the good example of what it's going to take to go and pay it forward and do that with their kids, and then on and on and on. So you guys, I know, both had great examples, and you've been great examples. And so hopefully we'll be able to pay that forward as well. So thank you both. And we'll talk to you soon.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.